Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So inshallah, we're going to go through the rest of the meanings of Baab Af'ala. One of the meanings is as-salb, which means negation, of form 1, the thulathi mujarrad. So it's the removal of the action associated with form 1. Example of this, here we have the verb sarakha, the thulathi mujarrad, and this verb means to call out for help. And on the form Af'ala, we get asrakha, which means to help one. In other words, it's the removal of distress. So it's to come to the aid of one who is calling, in other words. Asrakha. Now in the Quran, for example, now this is an event that will occur on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when Shaitan will address those people who followed him. Now, one of the things he says is, ما أنا بمصرخكم وما أنتم بمصرخي. So here he's negating completely, I am in no way whatsoever the one to remove distress from you, and nor are those people being addressed going to help Shaitan in any way either. Now the point is that the word musrikh is a ism fa'il on the pattern of asrakha yusrikhu, of Baab Af'ala. Okay? Now another example of this meaning of as-salb, negation, is these two verbs here. Qasata and aqsata. Qasata, the thulathi mujarrad, means to oppress, similar to the word zalama. While aqsata actually means to act justly. It's actually the removal of oppression. So this hamza has the negative meaning of the thulathi mujarrad. Now, in the Quran, we have the ism fa'il from both of these verbs. So we have, for example, وَأَمَّا الْقَاسِطُونَ فَكَانُوا لِجَهَنَّمَ حَطَبًا. But for the unjust, al-qasitun, they will be for hellfire, firewood. Here's the ism fa'il of the thulathi mujarrad. We also have this part here. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ, which are the ones who act justly. This is from أقسط يقسط. Okay? Next meaning of Baab Af'ala is الظَّنُّ وَالْإِعْتِقَادِ, which means assumption and belief. Two examples here. First one is أحمدت زيدا. Now the thulathi mujarrad حمد يحمد means to praise. So for example, I could say حمدت زيدا, I praised Zayd. When we say أحمدت زيدا, the pattern of أفعل, in this case what I am saying is that I am assuming or believing that Zayd is worthy of praise, that he is Mahmud. So I considered Zayd to be praiseworthy. This could be based on assumption, what I thought, or it could be based on something that I saw in front of me that made me think that he was worthy of praise. Next one is أبخلت زيدا, which means I considered Zayd to be miserly, or I believed it, or I assumed it, whatever it is. So the different levels of assumption, it could be with no evidence, with some evidence, or with a lot of evidence. And notice, first of all, is the thulathi mujarrad of both of these. One of them is muta'addi, and one of them is lazim. For example, bakhila Zaydun, Zayd was miserly. We could say hamida Muhammadun Zaydan, Muhammad praised Zayd. Now, in the thulathi of this verb, bakhila Zaydun, Zayd is the fa'il. The thulathi of this, Zayd, would be the maf'ul bihi. Just notice the difference there. Another example of this is أذممت زيدا, I considered Zayd to be blameworthy. Now next meaning, it's دخول الوقت, the entering of a time. So for example, here we have three verbs. أحصد, we covered this verb. One other meaning for أحصد is to enter the time of harvesting. If I said أحصد الزرع, the crop entered the time of harvesting. So it was ready to be harvested. And that's similar to the other meaning we covered in the previous lesson, of reaching a state. So they're quite related, those meanings. And we have also asbaha amsa, which mean to enter the time of morning, as-subh, and here to enter the time of al-masa, the evening. With this meaning, these verbs are tam. They're complete verbs. They're not naqas. Like, for example, the akhawat kana. For example, we could say asbaha zaydun maridan. Zayd became sick. This usage is the deficient verb, min af'ala naqisa, which is from akhawat kana. But what we're talking about is that it's actually tam. So in other words, it's complete by the fa'al. We say asbaha Muhammad. Muhammad entered the time of morning. An example in the Quran is فَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ حِينَ تُمْسُونَ وَحِينَ تُصْبِحُونَ. So this verb here is from amsa, yumsi, and this is from asbaha, yusbihu. So they're on Baab if'al, and they mean to reach the time of evening and morning. Now the final meaning we're going to cover is al-mutawa'a. Now this word will come across in other forms. Now we talked about al-mutawa'a in the introductory lesson, when we talked about the example of kasaratul zujaj and inkasaratul zujaj. Now in English it's called the reflexive, and when it comes to Baab if'al, it is the reflexive of form 2. Now let's first of all explain what al-mutawa'a is. It literally means to conform and obey. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at an example of this. So this is the form 2, and that's the form 4 that we're talking about. So the form 2 is muta'addi. It says فَطَّرْتُ زَيْدًا, which means I gave Zayd something to break his fast with. Now, when we talk about al-mutawa'a, it's when the maf'ul bihi does the action or conforms to the action without the need of the fa'il. So the fa'il is taken out of the picture. So here the fa'il is taken out. And here we get aftara zaydun. Zayd becomes the fa'il. And so this means Zayd broke his fast. Now, there is a difference between al-mutawa'a and al-fi'lu al-mabni lil-majhul, the passive verb. And I spoke briefly about this in the introductory lesson, because in the majhul form, the fa'il is not mentioned, but there is an assumption that there is a fa'il. When we talk about al-mutawa'a, this form does not contain the fa'il. Now, there are subtle meanings when it comes to the usage of the Arabs. Notice here, when it talks about Zayd breaking his fast, Af'ala is used. While we know that the form 2, there's mubalagha, and that's one of its main meanings, hyperbole. And this could indicate that when you invite somebody over to have a meal, that you put extra effort into it. So, فَطَّرْتُ زَيْدًا. There was effort involved, more so than if Zayd broke his fast. There's no need for emphasis there. That could be a subtle meaning involved with this usage. That completes the meanings for Baab if'al. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.